Hey, hi, and welcome to the PAX Overwatch Diversity Panel. I am Jen Cohn, and joining me is my fabulous group of castmates. We have 7 of my castmates from Overwatch who are all here to say hello. You want to say hi, guys?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Perfect. We're going to go around and introduce ourselves. So as I said, I'm Jen Cohn, and I do the voice of Pharah in Overwatch. I'm looking at Caro. Do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Carolina Ravassa, the voice of Sombra online.
Crispin?
Hi there. I'm Crispin Freeman, and I play the voice of Winston in Overwatch.
Keith?
Keith Silverstein, voice of Torbjörn, ready to work.
Paul?
I'm Paul Nakauchi, and I'm the voice of Hanzo.
And Anjali?
I'm Anjali Bhimani, and I am the voice of Symmetra.
And finally, Benz?
Always saving the best for last. Benz Antoine, the voice of Baptiste.
Thank you, guys. This is so nice, guys. We are all in this together. Perfect. So I know, perfect. So this was a very appropriate panel to assign to us because, as we all know, Overwatch is a very diverse game, and that's been a focus of Blizzard's in creating this game. And they put together a cast of characters from all over the world with all different kinds of backgrounds. Does anyone want to start by talking about their character's background? And specifically, if there's anything in your own background that relates to your character? Caro.
Hi. You know, Sombra is Mexican and I'm not. I'm Colombian, but living in New York, auditioning for a bunch of voiceover stuff, they always needed Mexican accents. So I felt like I connected to that. But the cool thing about the Overwatch community is that they've kind of embraced the Latina aspect of that in Overwatch. I mean, I know Reaper's also Hispanic, but Sombra's the only one who speaks Spanish. So I feel like we all connect on that level. Like, it doesn't have to be that you're Mexican to really love Sombra. And I feel like I meet so many Puerto Ricans and Hondurans and Argentinians who love Sombra because of the Spanish aspect. And then there's just some cultural things that make sense for all of Central and South America. And that's where we've connected. Like, there's all these jokes about like Sombra's, you know, parents maybe throwing a flip-flop at her, because that's a very typical Latino thing. Like, your mom gets mad and she's gonna like chuck a flip-flop at you. So that's called the chancla. So I think it just goes across all of any Spanish speakers. And so I feel like I've connected with her on that level. And there's just something about the language that I think connects everybody to it, which is really special.
Yeah, I think across the board, some of the coolest connections with people's backgrounds in this game is the fact that a lot of the languages have been brought in for so many of the characters. Even those of us, I know he's not here, but those of us who maybe don't speak the language, Johnny Cruz, once they decided, he actually learned to speak the Brazilian for his role in order to be able to create that authenticity. And I thought that was really, really special.
He did?
He did. He learned the Brazilian. Yeah. Wow. He worked so hard, and that is not an easy. I mean, that is not easy to speak Brazilian Portuguese. It is like, I've got feijoada. That's what I got, and abraço. That's it. I'm like, I can talk about the food. That's all I got. As far as Symmetra's background, I'm Indian American, so I definitely connect with her on that level. And there is such a high value in Indian culture placed on STEM fields. And so the fact that she was born in the slums, ends up connected with a dubious company, but with a company that is using technology and using science and using that for ostensibly for the world's good, I think is a really, really cool thing, because so many people in my family are connected that way as well. And then of course, speaking the Hindi is just so much fun. This is a little known fact that I like to tell people, but when she got her Hindi ultimate, when it was no longer the boring teleporter online and it changed to Yahi Param Vastavikta Hai, specifically, I was told in the booth, and I believe it was Michael Chu who said this is your justice reigns from above.
Yay!
So all connected to you there, Miss Farah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Keith?
I was going to say, I connect with Torbjörn actually on a couple of levels, just in terms of being a father. I connect with Torbjörn on his optimism and his practicality. In fact, when I was setting up for this, I was trying to get some cool wireless little earbuds, and it just wasn't working. And I said, just give me what I know already works. And that just feels like a very Torbs thing.
Yeah.
Now, Torbjörn is Swedish. And when we started recording for him, I had no idea what... I'm adopted. Let's state that first off. So a lot of my ancestry, I'm still learning. I'm on 23andMe, and I'm finding out new stuff all the time. And I have since being cast for Torbjörn found out that I am Scandinavian, and they are still trying to figure out exactly from where. So there's still hope that I may actually be Swedish because I'm just about everything else. So
Nice.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes, totally wild. Paul?
Hi. Yes. Well, of course, Hanzo is Japanese, and I am Japanese American. I was born here. My parents were born here, but I have a very ethnically rich culture, background. My grandmother was from Japan, and so I have a lot of connection there. Although I don't speak Japanese fluently, because my parents didn't really speak Japanese to us when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of like would only speak it when they didn't want us to understand stuff. And,
I think that's typical of so many immigrant families.
Yeah.
Yiddish is dead because of that, because that was the secret language that you didn't say to the kids.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I actually I learned some Japanese when I was older, and I actually took Japanese, so that's the background of Hanzo, which I really enjoy playing immensely, and going to Japan a couple of years ago, it was like really amazing because a lot of the scenes, in the background is so taken from places right in Japan, right in Tokyo and stuff. So it was really neat.
You were there during Sakura season too.
Yeah, I was there
the cherry
during
blossoms,
Sakura season.
which
yes,
is just like the Hanamura map.
Yes,
where you see the cherry blossoms just falling everywhere.
Falling. Yeah. We were very lucky because we were there for the peak of the season, so it was like incredible.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Benz?
Yes. For me, of course, whenever I open my my social media, I get messages from people that I can't believe this guy speaks Creole. For them, I mean, that's the exciting part for me is when I was, when Andrea started to poke around Montreal to see if she could find somebody who was Haitian, as I am, same as Baptiste. But that's pretty much where it ends. I've never, yes, I'm fluent in Creole, but I have never been to Haiti. So it wasn't so much me connecting to the character based on, the background of Baptiste and stuff like that, because there's no connection there. But the connection for me was Haitian, of course, but doing an accent, a French accent in English was kind of tricky, right? Even with the name itself, at first, my mom was mad at me because she was like, how could you make such a big mistake? I said, what was the mistake? She said, well, how you tell people your name is Baptiste? You should say Baptiste. And I'm like, well, I should say Baptiste if I was speaking in French, but it's sort of, in English, there's not really that many silent P's. So right there, you see how many you're so-called connected. You're from you have the same, born in the same country, speak the same language, and just with my mother and me, she's like, you're wrong. You did it wrong, and I'm like, no, actually, I believe I did it right because when Andrea asked me the question, she was speaking to me in English, I was performing in English. So my instinct was, okay, I'm going to say the name as an Anglophone would say it and not necessarily say it like a French person would say it. And, since then, a lot of people online sort of supported that view. Of course, they love the game, so that doesn't hurt. But yeah, it's definitely, it's been an amazing journey for me. As most of you know my story, this is my first voiceover gig. So I'm just a rookie, following you guys' lead. So it's just amazing to be part of such a great family and a great community, not just with you guys, but with the fans as well. So yeah, so I don't necessarily connect with him in that sense, but there's a lot of him in me, especially the dancing. I think me and him dance the same.
Love it.
I just have a question about Creole. So exactly what is Creole in terms of the combination of, I mean, it's French.
It's basically broken French.
Okay.
So it's like, it's like someone who speaks French. If you speak Creole to them, they sort of maybe can understand because the verbs are from French, right? Are based in French, but then they break it up. They broke it up to make sure that I don't want to get too deep in the history, but just to make sure that the French soldiers that they were colonized by would not understand what they were saying. So they would speak the French and then break it up, So it's very similar to a lot of Caribbean countries in that regard, that they break up. The English Caribbean, they broke up the English, and the French Caribbean, they broke up.
But so what?
Doesn't it vary depending on the country you're in? Like, isn't Creole slightly different depending on where it's spoken?
It is slightly different.
Okay.
But again, the verbs again are based, coming from the same place. So you can find, if you're from Dominica, or if you're from another country that speaks Creole, like maybe Mauritius, there's people who speak Creole from Mauritius, but they understand, and actually they can understand us from Haiti more than we can understand them. So I don't know if it's maybe just a strict numbers game, because there's so many Haitians around the world, and they're very confident people. So they're everywhere. They're in Miami, they're in New York, they're in Montreal, they're in, they're in Toronto, they're in Vancouver, they're everywhere. So in that regard, we feel lucky that way, because the other Creole speakers tend to adapt to the base of our Creole, which is kind of cool.
But so if it's a hybrid between French, what's the other languages that it's a hybrid with?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot. There's some English words. There's some Spanish words. There's a lot of it's a lot of mix. For example, I'll give you an example. In Creole, if something smells bad, or if your feet smell bad, they call it mayas. And if you really slow that down, that will sound like
my ass.
My ass.
There we go.
That's hilarious.
So,
oh my God, I love it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of mixes, and you learn every day. The more you hang out with older people, they teach you things that you didn't know. Obviously, since I've never really been there, and I've never even been educated in French either. So I came from a very unique place as well, in that I knew I was right in what I was saying, because I started school in English. That's all I knew. French I picked up, of course, as a kid, but I never went to school. So when the question came to me about the name, I just answered instinctively, and I knew that was right, even though everyone in my family still thinks I'm wrong. But that's something a story of my life.
I was gonna say that's the same thing. Whenever I try to speak Hindi around my mom, she's like, "No, it's yahi param vastavikta hai," and I say yahi param vastavikta hai. No, yahi param vastavikta hai, and I'm like, we're saying the same thing. I don't see the difference. But to this day, it's just there's a little something. It's just a little something. Oh, Mom.
Crispin, did you want to chime in with anything?
Sure. Your
connection to being a space monkey.
Sure.
When I was called on to play Winston, this gorilla from the moon, I reached deep into my space elf background and thought, yeah, this is perfect for me. I'm an elf from space, and it seems obvious that I would be hanging out on the moon with Winston. One of the things that I really appreciated years ago, we had a United Nations of Overwatch panel. And everyone who was in the panel that year, they put little flags out where they were sitting with all the different flag countries, right? The flags of the different countries that their characters represented. And they made one for me, which I kept, which is a moon flag.
I bet.
Oh, that's great.
I still have my little moon flag because Winston's from the moon. Yes, I mean, I think, well, the thing that I think that I really identify with Winston is his idealism, and this notion of sort of looking down at Earth from the moon is this notion of what they call in philosophy the fusion of horizons. When you look at things from enough different perspectives, it starts to fuse into this one sort of vision, and you sort of see it as holistically rather than as pieces against themselves. And if there's anything that my background is, even though, you know, I look like pretty normal white guy, on my mother's side of the family, I'm English, Scottish, German, possibly some Native American thrown in. And on my dad's side of the family, it's Russian, Romanian, and Polish Jew. And then I was raised in Chicago by a Black woman for much of my life who came from the south side of Chicago. I would run between, you know, downtown Chicago to the wilderness of Montana. I would also go behind the Iron Curtain. My family used to go to Czechoslovakia during the Soviet occupation. We would help out artists over there. So I was sort of dipping back and forth between, you know, Western democracy and Soviet occupation and oppression. And I was also bouncing between the north side and south side of Chicago, which is very segregated, you know, white side on the north and black side on the south. And so I was constantly having to jump between different frames of reference, and I could never privilege one over the other. So that's the thing I'm probably most grateful for in my upbringing, is that at a very young age, I had to learn, no, there isn't one way to look at this. I have to be able to jump to different perspectives. And so when somebody like Winston comes along, who basically looks down on the earth and goes, I see how this works. Sure, this sounds great. You know, and it's like, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense that I'd end up playing a character sort of like that.
Well, I too am 1/4 space elf, so it's a very small world that we share. But good. You're half Ashkenazi Jew, Eastern European Jew. I didn't answer in the beginning. I'm 100% New York Ashkenazi Jew, and my Middle Eastern accents are mediocre at best. So it was very much a lucky break when I got cast as Pharah, and they explained that she came from this very international background, and so it got to be more pan-Mediterranean than specifically Middle Eastern, because I could have done a mean Israeli accent, but my Arabic accents are not all that much. But what I love about Pharah is her relationship to her mother, it being complicated, her being so human, and that she's the great uniter, and she's the one who really pulls everyone together to work together. And she too is someone who wants to see everyone working together in a team and not necessarily be divided by their differences. So it's beautiful.
What's really lovely about, I just wanted to piggyback on that. What's really lovely about what you just said, Crispin, and also what all of you have said too, is that, you know, I know this is a diversity panel. We tend in the world to think of diversity in terms of either race or at least, you know, our ethnicity, or because we're all the human race. So that's not really accurate. So either our ethnicity or maybe our sexual orientation or whatever, like very specific structured things. But I think what's so beautiful about this game is that the diversity comes more from, there are so many unique characteristics to each character that create who they are. They are the sum of their experiences and the sum of so many different things. So it's not just about, oh, that's the Indian one, that's the Mexican one, that's the Swedish one. It's not just that. It's that all of them come from such diverse experiences, and that we learn so much about them through the game and through the lore. And that all of us have something that we have in common with them. You know, Crispin, you said the idealism, and that Jen, that she's the great uniter. And for me, Symmetra, I love so much how much she has taken her history and her difficulties in her past and used them to use them as fodder to inspire her to make the world a better place, which it can go either way, you know, and we see that in stories all the time. And so for me, that's something that's such a cool, unique thing about her. And we see that difference in each one of the characters in this game, who's gone to the dark side, who's gone to the light side, who's not sure, who's still trying to figure it out. I think diversity speaks in that way too, not just in terms of the structures that we all know of specifically, socially, internationally, all of that.
There's been so much talk lately in the union and in our industry about diversity in casting. And I wondered if you guys have had specific instances where you've either felt supported in that way or felt that there was, that it was something being paid attention to in a positive way or in a negative way. Did you ever feel like you were being asked to do something inappropriate? Do you have specific opinions about that? I mean, I know that I was recently listening to a conversation between a bunch of people who were talking about wanting there to be much more specificity in casting. And yet our union, I think, has supported people of all different backgrounds getting to play different characters of different backgrounds, because that's the beauty of voice acting. Does anyone have feelings about that? Benz, jump on in.
Yes, it's interesting because, as you all know, this is my first voice gig. But since that time, I've been approached by many different agents and whatever. So I signed on with this agent in New York. I signed on with Buckwald, right? And they were, well, we'll talk about that after because that has since changed. But during that time, I was with Buckwald, and they basically, the voice department, they were like, we want you to be more Black. For a lot of the stuff I was reading for, and in my mind, I'm like, wait a minute, what do I sound like already? So now, I come from, most of my work, 99% of it has been on camera. So you're already restricted. Obviously, you're on camera. You can't hide. You are what you are, which is great. Then when this came, I'm like, oh, this is nice. I can go into doing different things and having fun and not being trapped in this 6'4" Black guy body, which is not bad, by the way. But but I figured I could explore, artistically, creatively, just go out and do different things. And the first thing the guy tells me is, no, I need you to sound like more like Black. And I'm like, I didn't really have any rebuttal. I didn't really know if is this the right way or the wrong way? Is this how it goes down in voice? So I didn't really know how to react to that. And I actually never mentioned this to anyone until today. I felt like in my heart, I'm like, it didn't feel right, or anyway, it didn't feel like something that I wanted to restrict myself in that way. I didn't feel like that was what I wanted to do. And ultimately that kind of like what led to us not really working together anymore. Because if there's one thing after 30 years of being in this business, you have to be happy because the journey is too long to be results oriented. You know what I mean? So that was a really weird thing. I'd love to hear how it goes down for you guys in that respect, since you guys have a lot more experience.
Crispin?
So some of you may know that I run a podcast on voice acting called Voice Acting Mastery. And in one of the interviews, I did a very long interview with Phil Lamar, talking not only about his experience as an actor, but I took extra time to talk to about his experiences as an African-American actor trying to deal with the casting challenges that he faces. And it's something that I've actually had to work with my students as well. In addition to the podcast, I teach students. And it's very interesting, Benz, because I had a African-American gentleman come to my class, and he was a really good actor, and he was of African descent. I mean, he was from Africa. And so his accent was very unique, and it was a blend. It was a blend of sort of sounding like he was African and also American. He was sort of mixed, as most people's accents are when they come to America and they start learning English. Some of the words they say are more in their native accent, and some are more American sounding.
Absolutely.
And so he would get up to do characters, and I would have to say, he was a wonderful actor. His name was Bamba John Bamba. And I said, Bamba John, you're going to have to deal. I understand that Hollywood is painted as this very liberal place, but when it comes to casting, they can be really conventional and really sort of close-minded about stuff because they're so afraid of alienating an audience. They want to make it simple, and which means that they often go for stereotypes. And I said, right now, your accent is in the middle. You're not vanilla and you're not chocolate. You're like the swirl at the yogurt place, right? and the swirl flavor confuses the white people who are casting. They don't know where to put you. So you either need to sound like you come from South LA and like you're from Compton, or you need to sound like you're in Black Panther, right? You need to sound like you are full African. And he went, oh, I get it, right? He had to make that decision about one way or the other. Guess what he got cast as? He's in Black Panther, right? He was an actual on-camera actor in Black Panther like a year or so after he took class with me, playing an African warlord, because he got it. Now I gave him those tools because I want him to succeed. It is sad that that's where we are, right? That we're still sort of fighting with that. And even Phil Lamar says in the interview that I do with him that even when he's trying not to quote sound Black, that he will get cast as the one African-American character in the animated show. So I think the challenge is that when we're dealing with live action stuff, there's a lot more pressure for diversity, and there's a lot more pressure to let people be authentically who they are. When we get into animation and video games, I don't know if it's because the demographic that they're shooting for is younger, and so they start to think more stereotypically, and they're not willing to take the same risks because they just want to be able to easily slot people into their character types. But it is a challenge, and what I think what's going to solve it is more diverse writing, right?
Yes.
Rather than trying to shoehorn things into old storytelling tropes, we need new stories. We need new stories that have these more diverse characters, and so we don't have to mess around with this kind of thing. But we can play with that. I see that in something like Steven Universe, which I was honored to work on. You know, where they play with all sorts of diversity. It just got announced in Owl House, this really cool Disney film, or Disney TV show, animated TV show, that the main character is bisexual. Wow, that's cool. You know, that's really nice to have going on. But they also get a lot of pushback. Disney got a lot of pushback about that. And even the woman who's producing on it said, you know, I'm bi. I wanted my main character to be bi. And the executives at Disney said, you can't do that. And then somehow, like a year into production, they said, okay, we think you can do that. Right. So even in a place like Disney, which is usually, in terms of its politics, very LGBTQ friendly when it comes to their parks and when it comes to everything they're doing sort of physically in the world, in their storytelling, sometimes they can get really conventional and sort of conservative about stuff. So it's tough. We've got to keep boosting the voices and the creators who are trying to do more diversity and get different types of characters in the storytelling, so that people realize that these people exist and deserve a voice as anyone else does.
Absolutely.
Paul?
My experience has been, you know, the irony of doing voiceovers as a Asian American performer is that it's great that they are actually using Asian performers now, because in the past, you know, a lot of times Asian voices were done by white people. Mm-hmm. So it was great because, like, years ago, I was getting hired because I was like one of the few Asian, you know, voiceover people around. But in terms of doing other voices that aren't Asian, I can count on like one hand in terms of, you know, voices that I've done that aren't, you know, and I don't particularly sound Asian in my normal speaking voice, you know, but I've done like maybe little voices in like in a larger, you know, series or something. I've done a couple voices that weren't Asian, but that's about it, you know. It's always sort of like the samurai voice, or the, like I did for Carmen Sandiego. He was another kind of like a ninja character. And the interesting thing is that they don't necessarily want someone who has a really authentic like Japanese accent, because it's hard for them to understand. It's hard for people to understand. So, you know, they asked me to like, well, can you take it out more? Can you take it out? You know, to the point where it doesn't even really sound like a Japanese accent to me. But then they'll be go, oh, that's it, you know, and it's just like a tiny
like a reference to it, like a nod to it,
just a tiny nod, like, you know, saying your ahs like you know, I'm going to, you know. Just tiny little modifications, but I mean, it would be nice that at some point that you know, we would be able to be seen, and I mean, literally everybody should be able to do, you know, all kinds of voices, right? Because you don't see who, you know, the person, right? But that's still that way.
That still is an issue.
Yeah, that still is an issue.
And
I actually want to speak to the flip side of the experience, because even though, you know, after being in theater and then being in film and TV and being here, like I've run the gamut of extremely offensive experiences. And then now more and more, as the world, I feel like, is changing, despite this kind of intense struggle that we are having in the world between between different mindsets. I'm actually seeing a really cool wave of openness, at least in the auditions that I'm getting and the roles that I'm getting, and in the complexity of things as we start to create them. A character that I did in Apex Legends just came out, and you know, that much like Overwatch, that is set in a future so there's already an element of fantasy to it, and yet they're still doing everything that they can, just like Overwatch, to make sure that they are honoring the ethnicity and the background and the complexity of all the characters they write. And they've decided that this character, the way into this character is she's Indian and then moved to the UK, and she's really scrappy, and so she has all the Cockney slang, but she speaks with her native accent as an Indian. And because accents are so personal to everybody's experience, and that is our way as voice actors to convey so much of the complexity of the person's experience, I find it very interesting, because no matter what, I feel like no matter what you do, there's going to be someone who says, oh, well, someone from there wouldn't speak like that. And you're like, but someone with this experience, it's a different thing. You know, my mom has been in this country for 51 years. She still has an Indian accent, but she speaks with American slang. She speaks with American vernacular. And so I have found it very hopeful, and I found it very inspiring to know that there is so much attention paid in our sessions to being like, well, this is the background of the character. Talk to us about what you think, and let's talk about how we want to hone, how we want to fine tune what is the specific accent choice and what is the specific vocabulary choice, because really the combination of those two things, and then obviously the flavor that you give it as an actor, the combination of those two things is what's going to make this character unique. And I'm really excited by the fact that that is happening. And it happened with Symmetra when we were working on her sound, that she was much more highly educated British Indian sounding, even though highly educated British educated trained Indian, because obviously, you know, a lot of Indian folks either go to school in the UK or that's the training that they have in their own homeland, it comes from the UK. So just that yummy stuff is actually being talked about in the sessions. And I think people consumers and gamers and people in the world are starting to come along to, there is no one right accent. There is no, because everybody sounds different. We're all here in the US, well, except for Benz, you're in Canada, but we're all here in the US and we all sound completely different. So why would it not be the case for anywhere else? And that excites me. I will say also, one very sad experience that I had, sad for me, was an interesting development, I think, in the casting world, is that I was cast in a project as a character who looked Indian but didn't have an accent. And about halfway through the recording process, a few sessions in, they decided to change the character to look either, I don't know what they landed on, but it was either going to be Black or Latina. And they said, we have to recast you because you're neither of those things. And this, even though she didn't sound that way, they decided we want to go with someone who is of that background, even though we're not going to see them. And it was a shock to my system, because I'm used to that in TV and film, but I'm not used to that in voiceover. So it's a double-edged sword as an actor, if that is going to happen. But I can see how it might be a sign of progress for us in general in casting. That people are now just being much more aware of, let's be true to who we're trying to cast here. You know?
Get that. Keith?
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. I think in a perfect world, you know, like Benz was kind of saying, it'd be great that we could all just do any voice we want to do. I mean, creatively, it's fun to be able to explore, you know, any avenue. And I've spent a lot of my career doing that. I don't think I've been pigeonholed in anything in particular. I have had studios that only call me in for Black parts, and I have other studios that go, oh, wait, you're Black? I had no idea. So you have it's all over the board there. And when I say in a perfect world, it would be that way. This is clearly not a perfect world. We have a lot of changes to make. And I think that the studios are looking for authenticity is generally a good thing. It's a positive thing. We all can look back at Hollywood at the on-camera stuff all the way back to blackface and Breakfast at Tiffany's and all these examples of white actors stereotypically playing people of color. And even if they had good intentions, which a lot of those, I mean, who knows what they were thinking at the time. I mean, that stain has lasted to this day and will continue to continue on. And so it's not a perfect world. And I've had fans and I've heard discussions of people say the actor should always be authentic, but also how feasible is that? I mean, let's say you're doing a video game and you're supposed to play 20 characters in this game, or 10 characters, or whatever the case is. A character may only have a few lines. Do they really have to get an actor in that's that exact ethnicity? How important is that? It gets complicated, but I do like seeing that now authenticity is important. One other thing, because I think Crispin, you talked about the writing changing, and I think that's a big deal too. And also as an audience, I think we need to change, and we need to be forced to change. I went with my family to Disneyland, and we saw the Frozen live show. And Anna, as a child, was white. And when she was grown, she was played by a Black actress. It took the audience all of about 5 to 10 seconds to get over that and to move on and to enjoy it. And it didn't matter in the slightest. And I'd never seen that done before. It wasn't done for any particular reason, but it didn't matter. And I think when the writing changes and the audiences change and we start to realize that, I mean, there are times where authenticity is very, very, very important. And there are other times if it's not spoken, the lead character doesn't have to be considered Caucasian. It could be whatever. But I think in general, when you write something, you go, here's the script. If it's not mentioned, we all go, oh, white, white, white. And that's how it's cast. So if the writers are opening up and the developers are opening up to other ideas, that's going to open it up for everybody, and everyone will have equal opportunities. Let's hope. And we'll still get some opportunities to flex our creativity and play some different roles as well.
But it seems like it's very sort of case by case basis, because you were talking about Disney with Frozen, and then just like a couple of years ago, Little Mermaid went out, and this Asian girl was playing Ariel. And they got a lot of flack because, oh my gosh, Ariel isn't supposed to be Asian, but she's a mermaid. I mean, why couldn't she be? It's not like she's a mermaid. So, and they got all this kind of like hate about that. So it really is. It just depends on the project. It depends on I mean, that was maybe a couple of years ago. So maybe that would have changed. By now.
No, I think it's going to be challenging for audiences. And I think the more times that envelope is pushed, the better. I think people have to stick their neck out, and they have to do it because we have to grow. I mean, how many years of television and film and stage have we all seen, that's been a certain way? All those stereotypes perpetuated constantly. I watch old movies with my kids all the time. I mean, just when I say old, I mean even 80s and 70s. And there's something sexist and racist in every classic I have watched from that period. It's unbelievable. It's not necessarily so bad that we have to turn it off, but it's enough that I have to mention it to my daughters and kind of explain why they did that.
Like 16 Candles or
exactly. I just was watching that with Mickey, same thing, and having to explain that was the norm at that time, and we don't even think of it having been that way, but that's how it was. Crispin?
Alexander Hamilton, how dare we have him be Latino? I mean, why would you ever want to do that, right? We just need to stop. Let's just cancel that. Like, that's just not authentic, right? That's, of course, it's ridiculous. I think one of the things I want to chime in about is this notion of challenging the audience, Keith, because I think that's very interesting. In the world of sci-fi, that is one of the features of science fiction storytelling. The people who read science fiction want to be challenged, because one of the common trends in science fiction is an expansion of what we consider our in-group. Often in science fiction, there is storytelling where there's an us versus them storytelling, and the storytelling says, no, they are not a them. They are also an us, that we are going to extend to this other race or species or aliens or whatever the same rights and privileges that we would give to any sentient being. So whether it's Star Trek in the 60s, having this sort of international crew and having the first interracial kiss on television, or Lieutenant Commander Data, who is an android who we decide is part of Starfleet, or deciding we're going to make peace with the Klingons, or anything else, right? One of the features of science fiction is that you are challenging your notions of how things are supposed to be, and you are expanding your notion of what it means to be human. who qualifies as having human rights or the rights of sentient beings. And anyone who thinks that's not the case or wants to complain about that obviously didn't read X-Men. What the hell is wrong with you, right? This is the whole point of this storytelling. And most superhero storytelling, which I would argue Overwatch is sort of superhero storytelling.
Yes.
Most superhero storytelling lives in this science fiction world. And so I think what we're coming up against is that there are people who maybe are not science fiction fans, who are used to what we might call just sort of normal fiction storytelling with everyday people doing their everyday things. They may not be used to being challenged this way. Well, welcome to the planet. You know, there used to be a time where you could think, well, what I do doesn't affect somebody on the other side of the world. Well, it does now, right? You eating a hamburger from McDonald's can affect the Amazon rainforest. You and how you drive your car and use petrol or gasoline affects people in the Middle East. You and how you use your chemical fluorocarbons and sprays and air conditioning affects the ozone layer over the Australians and the New Zealanders. Welcome to the world, guys. We're all connected. And so this idea of having to expand the notion of us is just part of how we're going to have to survive on a limited biosphere. So yeah, I agree completely. We've got to expand it. And if science fiction can lead the way, and any of that sort of fantasy style storytelling can lead the way to an expansion of what it means to be us and stop and getting rid of this them notion, we're all going to survive better on this planet together.
Anj?
Crispin just said it so well, and I don't know that I could even remotely. Here's what I want to add to this. The thing that I love about science fiction, the thing that I love the most about science fiction is that science fiction enables us, because it is distant enough from us that we can see it as other, but it is close enough to our experiences. Usually there is some similarity to where we are now in the world that enables us to see things that may be not quite right with how we're seeing the world. And it serves to expand our view of what is possible. And that specific word makes me think of one of my favorite examples of it. And I know it's TV and film and we're talking voiceover, but the show The Expanse is such an incredible, it's an incredible science fiction show that everyone should watch to begin with. But they do such a wonderful job of pushing us into the future where, okay, no one's racist anymore. Now they're planetist because all of the races melded, but now everybody's still fighting that wanting to create an otherness within us. Because I think there is both of this there within all of us. There is a combination of a desire to unite and a desire to belong to something and to the world at large. And then there's this dark side of us that wants to say, I am me and you are you, and do this. And the struggle between that I think that's something that we all struggle with through our lives, through different phases. And I think that's part of what the problem has been, getting audiences and writers and everyone to understand how to move forward in this way. And so The Expanse does a really, really great job of saying, just like Star Trek did, of showing us the world as we see it now, showing us the world as it can be, and then showing us the struggles on the way to get there. And that's a very inspiring thing. It's like Winston's quote, or Dr. Winston's quote, Dr. Harold Winston's quote about, I'm going to get it wrong, but about dare to see the world for how you want it to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what science fiction is all about. And that's why I love so much. I love fantasy fiction, but it feels like it's stuck in one era usually. And science fiction feels like it moves forward. And that's why I love that so many games are set 700 years in the future, or on a different planet where we can see that potential for progress.
Caro.
Yeah, adding to all of this, I think our audiences do need to, obviously expand their minds in all of this. And I also think that casting has to work a little bit harder sometimes, because I always ran into, oh, we were casting this Latino thing and where were you? And I go, I was trying to audition, for film and TV, or, oh, we auditioned these people, we just didn't find enough Latinos. And I go, all of my actor friends are Latinos and none of them auditioned. How can you tell me you didn't find them. So as I experienced this, after I'd meet like the execs of this or the director 2 years after they shot that pilot of all Latinos, and like none of my good actor friends audition, that's where I go, you're not trying too hard if you're telling me that in New York City and LA, you didn't find all these Latinos. Right now, yes, that's changing for sure. And I've been told for the longest time that I'm too light to play Latina. So that's been my on-camera struggle. Right now, I'm really grateful that in voiceover, they call me for that, because I think that too often they just said, oh my God, we have this white voice actor who can do 1 billion accents, which is amazing. And I love accents. Of course, I want to do them all. But for so long, it's just like we weren't getting called in to play our own people. And then there was shitty Spanish being spoken or no Spanish because, oh, they found out they didn't speak Spanish. So I think that authenticity is important, so that people watching go, oh, he really is a Mexican, or he's doing a really great Mexican accent or whatever. So it's just like, I think that minorities haven't gotten to play themselves for the longest time. And so now we're doing it. And that's where I'm really grateful when I get called in to do a Hispanic accent, whatever is very stereotypical, but I'm going to do it because it's a job that I'm excited to play, you know? And on the flip side of that, I've also understood how sometimes casting also just goes, dude, this character, like she nailed the personality and what we were going for. And she's not perfectly Brazilian, which is my case right now with a character on a Riot game. Like, yeah, some fans are like, she's not Brazilian, why did you cast her? But dude, if there's just something that like you brought to the character that wasn't brought in by any other Brazilian that you did audition, there's got to be leeway to, okay, well, we're in the right continent, hopefully, or whatever. So it's just like, what are you going for? This awesome bombastic personality, or like Keith, you know, I can't imagine anybody else being Torbjörn, because sometimes that's Johnny Cruz. Like, I cannot imagine anybody else being Lucio. So we have to have that flexibility too when we love a character's personality, you know. I'm just glad, you know, Lucio isn't played by a white dude. Like, at least they're in the right direction and with the right sort of
the realm.
Yeah, feel.
Paul?
Yeah, I guess I was just going to talk sort of about what Anjali was saying about the us and them thing. I mean, I think part of the thing is that is just sort of the structure of drama and theatrics, is for there to be an us and them. You know, every story has sort of like, you know. So I mean, I think that is sort of just built in sort of the theatrics of scripts and things. But I guess where it has to sort of change is what we have stereotypically thought as the them. You know what I'm saying? The viewpoint has to change, and I think in changing that, that's what will make it become more equal in terms of the weight of it. Because when you always have a certain group of people being the them, you know, it sets up this power dynamic that is disenfranchising. So we need to have stories where, you know, the them is another group of people, or, you know what I'm saying? So we don't always have that power dynamic struggle, you know.
I think what happens, I think that's why the next step from the step after diversity is inclusivity, right? That's the step. And it's why I love what Jeff Kaplan said when this game came out. He said, the only people we want to exclude from playing Overwatch are people who exclude other people. Yeah. Like that idea that there is a story, there is some aspect of every character, there's some aspect some aspect of someone that everyone can connect with, one way or the other, whether it's their ethnicity, whether it's their storyline, whether it's their shape, their size, their attitude. Everyone feels included when they see their story being told through a character they can identify with. And it's how many different ways can people identify with the characters, I think, that makes that happen. So it's not Noah's Ark, it's not one of every ethnicity, it's how many different complex characters can we show that look and sound and feel and do completely different things. That I think that's the exciting development and I think Overwatch really did a great job doing that and kind of started this wave. And there are many other, I feel like the world is starting to come into that more and more and more.
Crispin?
This us and them thing is a challenge, right? Because we have hundreds of thousands of years of evolution that say, this is my village, and I'm going to defend my village. And those people on the other side of the mountains, I don't know what they're like, and I don't like them, and we're going to fight with them, right? So it's a massive experiment, and it takes effort and it takes work. And I'll tell you, it's the Japanese storytelling that taught me how to look at the them as an us, because it sort of depends on your cosmology and your culture. If you work in a cosmology where there is good and there is evil, and the evil is unredeemable, then that you say as evil, as them, can only be eliminated, right? Obliterated. There's no redemption of evil, right? And we see plenty of storytelling like this. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? And there's no redemption of the bad guys. But if there's anything that I learned from watching Japanese animation, is that often the villains are justified in their own mind and are working from a very wounded place.
Yeah.
And their means are just evil. They're not evil. They're just using evil means. And if you could address what the pain is and what the hurt is, you might be able to find some sort of common ground. Astro Boy is a classic example of this. And I use this example, Superman fights Lex Luthor because Lex Luthor is evil. Now, Superman doesn't kill Lex Luthor because that would be immoral, but he jails him and he imprisons him and Lex Luthor escapes and the story continues, right? But there's no reforming of Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor's always going to be a bad guy. In Astro Boy, who is sort of the equivalent icon of comics and animation in Japan, Astro Boy, in the last iteration of him that Tezuka worked on in the 1980s, he had a brother called Atlas, who was made from the same plans as Astro Boy. So he was a little robot boy, just like Astro was. But Atlas was raised by very nefarious criminal characters who wanted to use him for bad things. And Atlas basically has a chip on his shoulder against humans. Because in the world of Astro Boy, there are the robots and the humans discriminate against the robots. They see the robots as lesser. Well, Atlas as a robot says, what are you talking about? We robots should be ruling the earth. Okay, it's not far from like a Professor X Magneto thing, right? Yeah. Where Magneto feels sort of similarly. And so there's one episode in Astro Boy where the only one who can save the earth is Atlas. And Astro Boy turns to his brother basically and says, please, will you save the humans? I've been trying to be this ambassador between these two worlds to find a way for us and them to live along. And Atlas says, you know what? I'll do it. I'll do it because you're my brother. I don't like these humans, but maybe they're redeemable. Maybe there's something there. So I'm going to help them right now. And then I'm going to go off and I'm going to think about it. And I'm going to come back and tell you what I think. There's a possibility right there for some sort of understanding between the two. The notion that we're all going to look at everyone on the planet and treat them as family, that's a big emotional lift, right? Yeah. Is that really practical and feasible? I don't know. But if we constantly strive for saying, now, come on, do they have a point? Where they're coming from, do they have a point? Even if I disagree. And if they do have a point, are they just going about it in a bad way? And could we find a better way to solve whatever the problem is? Because otherwise, I don't know how we survive on this biosphere together. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not doing such a great job at the moment. So
no, because it's hard, right? It's really, really hard. Everyone keeps acting like America is a country that has always and will always exist. Hell no. We are an experiment. And we can be taken over by a very small group of very angry people. Look at Germany in the 1930s. It doesn't take much for a bunch of clowns to exacerbate people's fears and to go right back to that lizard brain, right? And go back to those old instinctive fight or flight instincts that we've evolved over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. It takes effort, it takes care, it takes empathy, it takes what we would call as humanity, right? Which is empathy for somebody else to say, I want to punch you in the face, but there's got to be some better way that we can solve this problem than ripping each other to pieces.
I think we have to wrap up.
We do?
So amazing. I know. I'm so inspired. Guys, I've said so little because it's my first time moderating any of these things on Zoom and I'm listening and you guys are brilliant. Let's wrap up by talking about in our future in gaming and in Overwatch specifically, what are we hoping to see in the development of games in general and specifically in Overwatch? What are we hoping for?
More backstory. We want more Overwatch backstory.
Seriously. Lore. We want more lore.
Yeah,
but truly that is it, because the lore is what shows us the complexity of all of the characters. The more we learn about all the different things that make them, the more we see that it's more than one thing that makes someone. The more unique every person is, and then the more everyone realizes, no matter what their walk of life, they are unique in their own way, and they are not alone, both at the same time. And that is what I'm really hoping people see, so that they can like get into the story that way.
Yeah. And that's what the fans really connect with is the backstories, you know. They really want more of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see, like, I see Sombra as this badass who can do anything and who's not scared of anything, but she has to have a vulnerability. She has to have loved somebody at some point that she lost, and therefore now that's why she's her own agent who will, you know, screw over her own side if she needs to. Like, I think that once we understand what happened in the past with all these people and who the important, like, loves were, it makes them human, right? Because we all want to love or be loved. And be loved. So you know, the more we uncover all of that in all the characters, I think the more interesting it gets and deeper, you know.
I want to see how we include Omnics in the us. There's been gestures towards that, and we have null sector now as this sort of break off aspect of the Omnics that are causing problems. But part of me wants to know, what is the inherent nature of silicon? We sort of know how carbon-based life forms work. And we know that social animals have a sense of morality. We have mirror neurons, and we have a sense of fairness and equity. And we can measure this not only in humans, but we can measure it in chimpanzees and dogs. You know, there are people who measure morality in animals. And it's an aspect of evolution in social animals that we develop a sense of equanimity and fairness. What is the essential nature of silicon? Right? How does silicon work in an evolutionary standpoint? This is something that the Matrix was sort of teasing with, but never really solved effectively, in my opinion. The third film sort of didn't really answer it. But if Overwatch could actually address what the inherent nature of silicon is and how an artificial intelligence works in an evolutionary standpoint and finds a way to work in a society, in a social construct, we have a way forward in life. Yeah.
I love you, Crispin. Oh my God. Great. Wait, everyone, I'm so inspired.
When Crispin speaks, it makes you feel like, oh my God, what do I have in my brain?
The Oracle, the Oracle. I can't stand it. Everybody, let's go through everyone and say where people can find you and follow you. Okay, your socials. Caro, start it off.
Hi, I'm on Instagram as Ravassa. My YouTube channel is called Hispanglo-Saxon because I do a bunch of cool videos with most people here, which is great. Twitter, Carolina Ravassa. Ta-da.
Yeah, Keith.
I am on Instagram. I'm just Keith Silverstein, easy to find, and at Silver Talkie on Twitter. You can find me there usually. Yeah.
Anj.
I am Sweet Anj with 3 E's in all of the places, on the YouTube, the Twitter, the Instagram, and the Facebook. I'm Anjali Bhimani because Sweet Anj is my personal page, and all you'll find there is doggy videos.
Benz.
Yes, Facebook and everywhere is Benz Antoine, and on Instagram it's Benz Antoine Official.
Nice. Paul.
Yeah, I'm just Paul Nakauchi, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Paul Nakauchi 1. Number
Crispin.
1.
Luckily, my name's pretty unique, so I was able to get Crispin Freeman as a handle on almost every social media platform. I will warn you, I am not a social media person, but if people really want to enjoy my content, my podcast is usually what I steer people to. I put a lot of energy into my podcast, so I guess I'm old school. I'm broadcasting, not so much social media, but I try to share all of my ideas and content that way.
And I'm at Hey It's Jen Cohn on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Twitch twice a week, where I have a live stream, all at Hey It's Jen Cohn. Guys, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I'm thinking about all of this now. I'm percolating.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for moderating, Jen.
Thank
Thank you, Jen. Great to see all you guys.
Seeing everyone.
Bye, guys.
I miss you guys.
Mwah.
Bye.
Mwah. Bye.
Bye.